Alright, in this video, we're going to look at how to build an authentication system, which is the register, login, and logout functions using Node.js. Alright, so first of all, we will just go to my desktop. I'm going to create a new folder and let's call this auth underscore system. So I'll open this up in my VsCode. And there we have it. So we have this thing open up here in our VsCode. And the first thing we are going to do is to set it up. Okay, so we're going to pull up our terminal. So in our terminal, we're going to type npm init with a flag y so that it gives us just the default setup. So wait for it, and this creates a file called a package.json file. And here it gives us the name of the application, the version, the description, the main, and all that. So inside of scripts here, we would be using you can say start like this, and then this is going to be node server.js. We will be using nodemon to make our work much easier, so we will do dev, and then in here we'll type nodemon server.js. Now take note that we have server.js here, which means this will be the entry file of our application. Okay, most people use index.js, but I would use server.js. So here I will change this from index to server. All right, now this uses common JS, which means that we are going to have something like when you're importing a package, you write something like const require and all that. No, but in our case, we want to use the import and export. So we will change this from common JS to module. Right, this allows us to use the import. Okay, so now we have this set up. The next thing we want to do is to install the packages that we need for this application. Okay, we can either start by installing the packages, or we can set up our folder structure. So I think I'll just install the packages. So we will do npm install Express. We'll need Express, we'll need Mongoose, we'll need .env. Express is what we are using to create our server. Mongoose is what we are going to be using to interact with our MongoDB database. Now .env allows us to interact with variables that we have stored in our .env file. And we'll also be installing cors. Now cors helps to ensure that when we are setting up our front end, because of the URLs that they'll be using, we will not have conflicts with them. Okay, we'll not have what we call cross origin. We will not have those issues, right? So we have cors, and then we would also need something called joey. Joey is going to be used for validating our schema. Okay, and then we also need bcrypt. Bcrypt is what we are going to be using to hash our passwords before we send the password to the database. Then we'll be using JSON Web Token. This is what we'll be using for creating and verifying tokens. So I'll hit enter for now and just wait for these packages to install. Okay, I think I made a mistake here. So okay, so we missed an N over here. So it's supposed to be npm. Hit enter. As you can see, our packages are being installed. So we wait until it's done. Alright, so our packages are installed, and now you can see them under dependencies here. When we scroll down a bit, we can now see we have our bcrypt, course.env, Express, Joey, JSON Web Token, and Mongoose. And you can see that we have a file here that says node models. We have these node models because of these packages that we just installed. Now package -log.json just logs up the dependencies we installed with their version numbers to ensure that when someone picks up this application later, either from GitHub or something, when they hit npm install, it can give them the same versions that we are using to prevent some conflict. We'll be installing NodeMon, but for NodeMon, we are going to install it as a developer dependency. And so we will do npm install --save -dev NodeMon. So this will be a developer dependency, and we've already set NodeMon here. Now NodeMon listens to our application for changes. Most of the times when we use just the node, we would always have to stop the server and rerun the server anytime we make changes. But when you use NodeMon, it automatically restarts the server as the changes have been made. So we are done here. I think the next thing I'll do is to just open up some new terminals here. I'll delete this one and I'll add a new terminal. Just rename this to server. Just to remind me that this is where I'll be running my server command to run. So here's commands. In case I want to install any other package, I'll use this. Alright. So now we have our dependencies installed. The next thing we want to do is to look at the folder structure of our application. First of all, we'll need a config directory. Config. Now it is in this directory that we'll have our database file. So we say database.js. Alright, then we also need the models. So we say models, and in here we are dealing with a user model. So we say user model.js. Alright, then we will need controllers. So we say controllers, and in here the controller we are dealing with could be, we could use auth controller, or we can call it user controller.js. Alright, now the next thing we want to look at would be the route. So we'll say a route, and we can also call this user routes.js. So we have our config database file, we have controllers, models, we have routes. We'll need our entry point file, which is our server.js, and then we'll also need a directory called middlewares, which we'll be using to protect our routes. So we'll call this middlewares like this, and in here we'll create a new file. We'll call it let's say user middleware.js. We can have something like this. Alright, so just close all these files, and then we can also create a new file called the .env. This is supposed to be in the root directory of our application. Okay, now in .env we will need some variables. The first one we'll need is what we call the MongoDB_URI. Now we'll leave it empty. We would go and create that later. Then we'll also need what we call the port. The port we're going to be using for this application will be 9000, and we'll also need something called the JWT secret. So JWT secret will generate this too also online, and then we can use it in our application. Alright, so for now, these are the things we would need. So let's leave this empty for now. Alright, so quickly we want to just set up our database connection. So we'll go into the browser and go to mongodb.com. Okay, so let's sign in. I'm not sure if I have an account with this email, but let's try and see. So if you don't have an account, you just go ahead and then create the account. It's very simple to create. So I think I have an account with them because it's redirecting me to a projects directory here. Alright, so here you can see that there is no project. So now anytime you come here, you log in anew, it might not really bring you directly to the projects, but in case it brings you here, all you need to do is to just create a new project. So click on new project, and let's call this auth system Node.js. You can name it whatever you like, and from here the next thing I want to do is to just click on next. Alright, now the project owner is my email address, and it says add new members. We don't want to add any members, so we just click on create project. So now our project is being created, and so here you can see the organization name says Nathan's org and all that. Then we have auth system Node.js. This is our project. Now after creating the project, the next thing we do is to create a cluster. So click on create here, and we want to go with a free tier, so we click on free. Now we have a default name here which says cluster 0. I'll leave it like that. I will not be changing the name of the cluster. Then we'll click on create deployment. Okay, so let's do this verification real quick. Okay, that didn't work. Verify. Alright, so our cluster is being created, and now take note of what we have here. It says your current IP address, so we have my IP address here, and they are asking us to create a database user. So what we'll do is to just, I'll call myself let me just put up my name, Nathan. The password, I need something very simple, so I would say auth 500, yes, or let's say Nathan auth 500. So you can copy this password, then after that we create the database user. Alright, now after creating the user, the next thing we are going to do is to choose a connection method. Now in our case, we are dealing with Node.js, so we go for the drivers. So click on drivers, and here we have this connection string. This is what we need, but as you can see, we have Nathan here. Nathan here refers to the database user, and this is the database password. So we copy this particular string here, then we go into our VsCode, and then we paste the string here. This is what we'll be using. Alright, okay, so let's go back to the browser, and then we can just click on done. Now the next thing we want to do is to set up database and network access. We want to make sure that we are able to access our database from anywhere. because for now we are being restricted to only my IP address. Okay, so we can go to network access and we'll do IP access list. So in here, we can just click on add IP address and then we'll choose allow access from anywhere. And this is it. So you can just say allow access from anywhere. This is not necessary, it's not important, so but I just want to have it as a comment. So click on confirm and now it is pending. So when it's done, it means I will be able to access our database from anywhere. When you don't do this, you only be able to access this database using this computer or the computer with this IP address. When you have a different computer with a different IP address, you won't be able to access it. All right, so now we have this. So this is our database user. We can go back. There's a project overview. Okay, so we can just click on. All right, so for now we have we've already done our connection. We can click on clusters. So it's going to load our cluster for us. Now this is creating a sample data set for us, some database information, which we can start interacting with, but we are not going to be using that in this. So it's still loading. So I'll leave it for now and we'll go back to our VsCode. So in here, we need a JWT secret. So we'll go into a new tab in the browser and we can just type generate JWT secret. Take note that the JWT secret is just some random characters, which means that you can just write some random strings over there and you wouldn't have a problem. All right, so for this particular one, this says 256 characters. This says enhance security, so we can choose any of them. So maybe I would want to go with the 128 and then I'll click on, okay, it says moderate, so this is strong. Okay, generate the key and now we have the key here, so I'll just click on copy to clipboard and let's hope it's copied. So I come and paste it here. I wonder if that is exactly what it generated. I don't think I like how this looks, so let's use this instead. Okay, I think this is much readable. Okay, so you can paste this one here. So these are just random characters. You could have typed this out yourself, right? So now we have our MongoDB connection string. We also have our JWT secret here. So the next thing we're going to do is to connect our application to the database. So how do we do that? We've installed Mongoose already. So first of all, we're going to import Mongoose. Remember, Mongoose helps us to interact with our database. So we import Mongoose from Mongoose. So I just click in here and we are done. The next thing we also want to import is maybe .env. Okay, so we can import .env from .env. Now we could just put .env/config over here and we wouldn't have to come and initialize it anymore. So we have this done already. Okay, so now we need to create a function that would allow us to connect to MongoDB. So we'll call this connect to MongoDB. So I'll say const connect to database. This is going to be an async function. Async means that we are going to await till we get some information. So because we are going to connect to a particular server or the database, we would have to await until the server responds to us. Now when we write, I'm going to wrap this in a try catch block. So first of all, now that we have our async function running, first thing we're going to do is to let's attempt to connect to database using the connection string and from the environment variable. So we would await Mongoose. So we're using Mongoose to do the connection. Mongoose.connect. We have process.env dot. Now we're going to call in our variable, which is this MongoDB URI. So I can just copy this, come back here, I paste it here, .MongoDB URI. Okay, so, and then we have our connection done in here. All right, now, after connecting this, we would want to have a message in our console if in case we were able to connect properly. So we'll say console.log, and then we can just put up a message that says connected to, or better still, we can just say database connection successful. And since we are wrapping this in a try catch block, after the try we need to have our catch block. Okay, we need to have a catch block. So we say catch. What are we catching? What we are catching here is an error. So we say catch error, and then in case you catch an error, what do we want? We want to also send a message. So we say console.log or console.error. Any of them works. So we can just say console.log, and then here we say database connection error. Okay, so you can say database connection error, and then this error here means it should display to us the full error in details. All right, so when we are done, we need to export this connect to database so we can use it in other files. So we say export default connect to database. All right, so unless anything else comes up, our application should be able to connect to MongoDB without any problems, right? So this is just the simple code that we use for connecting our database. So I think we made a little error here. We need to fix this. So when we are importing, we have to do import this way, and we say .env/config this way. This is the right way to write it. Okay. Now the other method could be, we could have written it this way. We would say import, then we say .env from .env. Then from there we can now come and say .env.config this way. But as you can see, it is very simple to import it the first way, how we did it here. All right, now that we have our database connection done, the next thing we can work on would be to create our user model. Okay, since we are dealing with authentication, we'll just come in here into our user model, and here too we'll need import. We're going to need Mongoose for this, so we import Mongoose from Mongoose. And then first thing, we're now going to define the schema for the user. So define the user schema. So say const user schema is equal to new. Okay, new mongoose dot schema. Mongoose dot schema. And in here, we now have to specify the fields. So first field we need is the field we call the username. So we have the username and then open curly braces. And in here, I need to specify the type of field it is. And so we have type to be a string. The next thing we want to specify whether it is required. Yes, and we say required is true. Then we also want to make sure that the usernames that are provided are always unique. Okay, then we are done with the user name field. The next thing will be the email field. So we say email. Then for this one too, the type would be a string. It's also required, and we also expect that it should be unique. Alright, then after here, we want to specify the password field. And for the password, we also need a type of, say, string. And this also needs to be required. So required is true. Now, take note that we are not adding any messages here because we are going to be using Joey for the database, for the schema validation. So on a normal, we could have added some messages here in case it is required and the user does not provide it. What message or what error message should be displayed? But in this case, we are not using that because we'll be using Joey for that. Alright, so required is true, and that's all for the password. Okay, so next thing we're going to do is to create indexes. Or we can just create an export, but let's just do indexes, create indexes for the unique fields. So in here, for the unique fields, we have username, which is unique. We have email too, which is unique. So basically, we will specify user schema dot index, and then the username field is supposed to be unique. So this is it. Alright, then we also have the email, which is also unique. Okay, our password is not unique, so we can leave the password as it is. Now here you can see we have username, comma, we have email to be true. Now we could combine all this into just one file. This is how we can write that. So whilst we have schema.index, then we have username one. We could just put up a comma here, and then we say email to also be one, and then we can now specify that unique. Both of them are unique, so at once they are all unique. So this simple line replaces the two lines. So the next thing is for us to create and also export the user model. So what we've done is to create the schema. So what we've done here is the schema. Now we are creating the user model. So we say const user will be equal to mongoose dot model. So I'm modeling a user here. I will say it's called user, and then we are modeling the user based on what our user schema. So we'll say user schema like this. Then after that, we need to export this particular user so that we'll be able to use it in other files. So export default user. Alright, now so instead of just user, I think I would prefer to call it user model. Yes, so I'll call it user model. here we have it, user model. All right. So now our user model 2 is ready. We could quickly just jump into setting up our controllers, where we would be writing logic for registering a user and logic for logging in and logic for logging out. But let's just write for our server file the entry point of our application, or better still, we can just finish up with this one. So let's write the logic for our controller. Okay, now for this one, we would want to import user. You want to import the user model from this user model. And since we are going to be hashing passwords in here, we will need our bcrypt. Bcrypt is used for hashing the passwords before they are sent to the database. We also need JWT from JSON Web Token, which is going to be used for creating and verifying tokens. Then we also import this .env because we are going to be interacting with environment variables. And so now the first thing we're going to do, also we have to also import Joey from Joey. Let me be sure we installed that. So let's go to our package.json. Okay, we installed Joey, so we can move on with it. Now, first thing we're going to do is to set up our Joey validation. So we'll say Joey schema for user validation. Now, let's call this, let's create a variable called the user validation schema, and we're going to be using Joey for this. Okay, so we say is equal to user validation schema, and we are using Joey, so we say joey.object, and here is where we are going to specify we are going to specify the minimum characters, the maximum characters, and we also specify whether it is username is required, emails are required, and all that. Okay, so in here, first things first, I would say username, bring in a column, say Joey dot string. Okay, so Joey dot string dot required, which means all this is required. And then I also want to add a message which would show up for the user, so just in case it's not provided. So now we have username joey.string required, message is what username is required. Okay, so if the username is not provided, the message will tell you that the username is required, but I don't want the message displayed in this manner, so I'm going to make it this way. So message, and then in here I'll now specify. So if we have string dot base, we would say username is required, and this is supposed to be in quotes this way. Good, since it's a message. Username is required. Then I also need to come and specify the next one. We didn't write the minimum values here, so we'll say dot. In here we'll say dot min and then the max. So the minimum characters that are required for a username is 3, the maximum is 30, and is always required. So we bring in a message here which says that string.base, the username is what's required. Okay, then in case the string, whatever is provided, if it's empty, we'll say username cannot be empty. All right, I think is literally the same as the other one, so we can ignore this for now and use string dot main. So we'll say username. This is supposed to be in quotes, so we will say string dot main value, and the message says username should have a minimum length of 3. Okay, it should have a minimum length of 3. Then string dot max, it means username should have a maximum length of 30. We specified it up there, so it should be 30. And you say any dot required, the username is required. So now we are through with the username. The next thing we want to focus on here would now be our email and the password. And as you can see, the AI has already suggested this for us. So email says is a string, yes, which we specified here. Email is a string, required true, unique true. So in here we have okay, so let's just rewrite everything. We'll say email, it should be joey dot string. Email is a string, and make sure that it should be an email, it should be required, and these are the messages. So string dot base will say email is required. Dot email, you have to make sure that it is a real email. It must have the format of an email. If not, that it is going to display this message as an error. Then with the password, so we say our password is required, and the password must have a minimum of 6 characters long. Okay, then we are through with the password validation as well. Now that we are through with our Joy validation schema, take note we are going to be using this in our register function, login functions, and all that. So next thing we are going to do is to now write the function to register a new user. So I would say register a new user. So as usual, we'll create a function export const. We'll call it register user, or we can just call it register only. So I think let's use register. So register, this is also going to be an async function. So, and it takes request, it also takes in request. Oh, come on. Takes in request, response. So this is basically an arrow function. So before we do anything else, we want to first of all extract or the username, right, and the password from the request body. So first of all, we'll say extract user details from the request body, and the user details are username, email, and password. So we'll say const, and then we pull them up, which is username. We have email, we have password, and all that. Okay, so we've extracted this. The next thing after extracting the user details is to validate the input. So we say validate user input using our Joey schema. Now, if we had specified if we had done the validation in the user model, we wouldn't have to be doing this. But since we are using Joey for this, that's why we have to go through this process. So first of all, we'll say const in case there is an error. So const error, user validation schema dot validate. What are we validating? We are validating the username, also the email, and then the password. Alright, now we want to now indicate that if there is an error, what should happen. Okay, so we say if error, there is an error, we are going to return our response, the res. So res, the status code will be 400. Okay, 400, and we want this to be in JSON form. So we say 400.json, and then we set out a message here. So the message says error.details, that message. So it is supposed to be 400. So 400.json. Okay. Then we have it in the right order. Message error.details, and then we have our message here. Okay, so from here we also now want to work on creating the user. So after checking for validation, we will now have to create the user. So to create the user, we would say, we'll first of all try to check and see if the user exists in our database already. So we'll say const existing user. So existing user be equal to await our user model dot find one. So first of all, we are trying to find if the user exists or not. Okay, so this AI is faster than us. So let's take it a step by step. So first of all, check to see if a user already exists. But I think I would want to wrap this in a try catch block so that in case there is an error, we can easily catch it. So you would have something like this in here. Okay, check if user already exists. So const, or better still, we can say let user await user model dot find one. So here we are trying to find if the user exists, and we find that through the email. We use the email, we check the email that is provided, and we base on that email to see if there's a user already. Now we say if there is a user, what will happen? If there's a user, we'll try and return an error message that says user already exists. And then we would also need to catch our error just in case there is an error. So we'll catch error. It's supposed to be parenthesis. Okay, and then here we can return res.status 500 message server error. Okay, so if a user is found, we would return this message that says user already exists. Okay, and also we try to catch and say that just in case it is not so, then that means what? It should give us a server error. Alright, but we'll go back in here. After checking the user, the next thing we need to do is to focus on also creating the new user. So we would say create a new user instance. And so to create a new user instance, we would pull up the variable user that we created earlier. We say new user model. Okay, new user model. And remember, we need username. When we are registering a user, we need a username, we need email, and we need password. So basically we have email and we have password over here. Now, after specifying this instance, we need to hash the password before we can save it. Okay, so we'll first of all hash the password. Here we're going to call bcrypt. So we'll create a variable called salt. Say is equal to await. Then we'll call our bcrypt dot gen salt of 10. So gen salt, and next thing is to hash the password with the salt. So we'll say user dot password equal to the await bcrypt dot hash. So now we have password which is in here, which is a field. Password here is a field, and then this is a variable called salt, and we are just generating this salt here. This enables us to be able to mix up the password with just some characters that will come from bcrypt. So here we say user.password is equal to await bcrypt.hash. So we are hashing the password and also with this salt, right? So after hashing the password, the next thing we'll do is to now save the user to the database. So to save, we just do await user dot save. Now this here would ensure that our user is saved, right? But when the user is saved too, we also want to send in a message and even generate some tokens as well. Okay, so after the user is saved, the next thing we want to do is to generate a JWT token. So we would say const, let's say token will be equal to JWT, which is JSON Web Token, and then we sign. To sign, we are going to be using ID of the user. So we say ID. We say user dot underscore ID. Underscore ID. Then we're going to call our JWT secret. Okay, so this is the JWT secret we had in our .env file. This one. Okay, so we are also specifying how long the token should last, and the default here is saying 1 hour. So it means after 1 hour, this token will no longer, you will no longer be able to use this token. Okay, so when this is done, we need to return some response from the server. So we say return res, which is response, and this time our status code is going to be 201, so 201 dot JSON, and in our case we want a message. We want a message, so I would come here and say message. We say user registered successfully. Okay, then we will now also bring in our token. So it will give us a message like this first, and then the token. Now we could also do something simple here, which will tell us the email of the user. So we can say this, you can just specify something like this in here. We say this, and you can call in the email. So we say this way, but for this to work we need to change this to template strings. So we need to change this to template strings. Good. So it will say user with this email address registered successfully. Instead of email, we could also use username, and that will also work perfectly. Okay, registered successfully, and then we have our token. Now we also specified the error message here, so we are done with our register user. So you can see the flow. First thing we do is to do our validation with Joey, and so we have this function here, which is what the user validation with Joey, and from there we are registering a new user here, and the first thing we do is to extract the user details, which is username, email, password, from the request body. Then we validate the input. So when a user is entering the input, which has a username, email, and password, we'll call this user validation schema to validate whatever is being written. In case anything that the user writes does not fall under these rules that are set up here, we would now have these messages being displayed. Okay, so validating the input, then after that we now check. After input is validated, the next thing is to check if the user already exists. Now the easiest way we do that is by using the email. So we create a variable called user, and then we are waiting the email from what the user model. So we say that if user, so this if user here means that if the user exists, then we return this. Okay, so we can even put a comment here that says if user exists, we return what? This error, user already exists. Now if the user does not exist, then that means we are able to create a new user. So in creating a new user, we use this username, email, password. Now we can't just send this quickly to our database, because if we send this quickly, our password is going to be in plain text, and you can easily see the password the user entered. So in order to avoid that, we hash the password before we save it. So we use something called gensalt from bcrypt, and so we just create a variable here called salt, and then we put this in here. We could have just ignored this, then we write await bcrypt.gensalt. Alright, now that would mean that wherever this salt is written, we would have come to write the whole thing, which is our await bcrypt.gensalt. We come and write it here, but the variable makes it simple and easy for us. So we say user.password is now equal to what? bcrypt.hash. So we are hashing this password together with the salt. Now after hashing the password, then we can now save the user into our database. Right, now when the user is saved into the database, the next thing we want is it should generate a JWT token for us, which we'll be using to what? Verify the user, or which would allow the user to be able to access certain routes. So we have this here. Okay, I made a typo here, so it's supposed to be username like this. So you have username. All right. Okay, so the next thing is to come up with or login logic. So here register user is done. The next thing here is to log in a user. Okay, so export const login, can use lowercase login. This will also be an async function. Request response. All right. So here too, as usual, we are also going to extract the login details, and for the login, we will not need username for logging in. We will need just the email and password. So it means for this API, users can only log in with their email and their password. We have request dot body. Okay. So now that we have done the extraction, we will now call a try and catch block. Okay. And first of all, we need to find the user by the email. So to do that, we would also create a variable here called const user, and then we await our user model like we did previously. Dot find one, and in this case we will specify email because we are using email to find the user. Then we also need to run some check. If the user is not found, we need to return an error. So if not user, then we send in this. Okay, if not user, let's rewrite this. If not user, open curly braces, and then in here. Okay, so we have to return arrays.status to be 400. We need to return in JSON format, so we would say message. The message that should be sent is invalid email or password. So when someone is trying to log into our application, we first of all check to see if the email the person has provided exists. Now if there is no email like what is provided by the user, then we can come down here and say if there is no user, then we can send in this error message. But after doing this, we need to come into this, and let's just write up our catch block. Okay, in case there is an error, we'll go back to the login logic, but for now let's just get rid of this for here. Okay, all right, so here we are trying to find via the email, right? So from here we now have to compare the password So we'll compare the provided password with the password that is stored in our database. Okay, to be sure. So we say const is match. This is just a variable. You could call it const anything. So const is match await bcrypt dot compare. So we want to compare the password that is entered by the user and then the user dot password, and this will come from the database. Okay, then we would come down and say that if it doesn't match, if the password provided does not match what we have in our database, we'll just return a message like this. You can say, instead of this match, you can call it maybe password match. So we check to see if the password match. Okay, so in checking to see whether our passwords are matching, I think we are making a mistake here. Let me see where the error is coming from. Oh, I see. Okay, so this is supposed to come out of this block. Okay, it's supposed to be out of this block, which was a mistake that we made. Okay, so here we are comparing the provided password with that. So if it's not the password, we return this message. Now, this is the same as what we did for the registration. Okay, the JWT signing. So basically here we are saying that if the password does not match, it should return this invalid and all that, right? Now, because we are checking to see if it does not match, it should send a message. It simply means that automatically, if the password matches, then we move to this next block. So here we generate the JWT token for the user. And then, as you can see, we sign it with the user's ID, with the JWT secret as well. And then we return this status code of 200. And we say user, and then user.username logged in successfully. So in this case, we can still maintain the username, or we can change it to maybe email. I think I prefer email in this scenario. Okay, so we say email, the user is logged in successfully. Okay, so next is to write for the logout function. Let's see where the login started. Okay, so log out a user. To log out a user, say export const logout. async request response. Okay, so for logout, usually when we have a front end, since you are using JWT, the logout will be handled by the client side. Now the client side is the front end side by deleting the token. Okay, so we can just return something simple like this. Okay, because for JWT things, it's if we had a front end, it will be in that front end that the main logout logic will work. But in this case, we just send only a response that says what the login or the logout was successful. Now in subsequent lessons, we will look at how that is done. So for now, we will just have this one that says user has been logged out. We can also try and get the profile of the user. Okay, you can say we should get the user profile. Alright. Now, as you can see, this is also just a function, and it's an async function that will help us to get what the user. So first of all, what do? We find the user by ID by excluding the password field. This minus password here means you are excluding the password field. So we find the user by his ID, request.user ID.select minus password. Now here, if the user is not found, okay, if the user is not found, we return an error. If not user, return this error, user not found. Other than that, we return the user profile as this. Okay, so basically this is how we go about this, and then our user controller is done. The next thing we want to look at will be our route folder, or better still, we can just work on with our middlewares. Okay, we can just go on with the middleware before we do the route. So for middleware, we'll go on and import JWT from JSON Web Token, and then we'll import user model from user models, and then here we're going to create a middleware to authenticate the user using the JWT. Okay, or you can also call this protected route. So it simply means that if a user is not logged in or a user has not been authenticated, the user should not be able to access certain routes. And in our case, that route will be the profile route. So we say export const protect. This should be an async function. It also takes in a request response, request response, and then next. Okay, so first things first, we need to get the token from the header. Okay, we get the token from the header. How we do that is to, first of all, create a variable, we'll call it token, and then we'll now try to check if a token is found in the header. So check if authorization header is present, and start with a bearer token. So you say if request dot headers dot authorization. Okay, so this one first of all is checking to see if the token is found in the header, right? Then this one too, this particular this next line of code, request dot headers dot authorization starts with bearer. Now what this does is to, first of all, we want to see if the token is found in the header. Then this one also checks to see, since the token is found in the header, we also want to be sure the token starts with bearer. Okay. Now we want to wrap this in a try-catch block. So first of all, we want to extract the token, or we want to get the token from the header, and then we also split it. So we can say get token from header and split it. How do we do that? We say our token will be equal to our request dot headers dot authorization dot split. Alright, and then we have this beautifully split. Alright, now let's just put up our catch here so that it stops giving us this warnings. Catch error, and let's just return a simple error message. Okay, so we are getting the token from the header, and then we are splitting it, which is what we just did down here. Alright, then after splitting it, we need to verify the token. Okay, so let's say verify token. Let's create a variable, let's call it decoded, and we say JWT sign. Sorry, this time we are verifying. When we were creating it earlier, we used sign. So since we are doing verification, we choose JWT dot verify, and we say token. Now we also want to pull up our env file. Okay, now this is just to ensure that the token we are trying to verify, we are using the exact JWT secret, which is from our env file. So I think here too I would want to use the .env or import .env to use it. Alright. Okay, so back to this JWT. Okay, so we get the token. Now we are verifying the token. Now we need to also get the user from the token and attach it to the request body. So to do that, we will say request dot user request dot user, then we await our user model, then we find by id coded dot id, and then we want to select it without the password. Okay, then after that we can just call our next, which is just next. And we've already written the code for our catch block already, so our middleware is ready. This middleware is done. Okay, now we have middleware done. We want to work on the route file. So for the route file wouldn't be much. We will just need to import Express. We'll be using Express. Import Express, and then we also have to import the register function, the login function, and the logout function. So we will say import register. Let me see how we named them. We have register, we have login, and then we have logout. So it's going to be register, login. I'm not sure we need logout in those. Yeah, sure. We'll definitely need logout. So logout from controllers user controller.js. This is correct. And then we'll also need the function from our middleware, right? Okay, we also need that. And I think we can just also use the get profile from here. Okay, then now let's call our protect from the middleware file. Alright, so the first thing we'll do is to initialize what we call a router. Okay, and this is coming from Express, so we say const router is equal to express dot router. The next thing is to check our public routes. So public routes that would be router dot post, and here we have slash register, and then we can call in our register function. Then basically it's going to be the same throughout. So just do shift alt down, and then I think that's it. So this will be login. So change this to login, and this will be logout. This will also be a logout. Then the next one will be the profile. So for the profile is a protected route. It means if you are not logged in, you can't have access to this. You can't work with any of these. Okay. All right. So in this sense, we are done with our routes also. The next one we want to work on will be our server file. So first thing in our server file, we import Express. From Express, we would import, okay, for here we're going to be importing quite a number of things. So we also need cause here, cross origin site script, and also we also need to import our database function. That will be connect to database. We will need to import the user route and then our .env. So first thing, let's initialize initialize express. So we say const app is equal to express. Now this simply means that instead of writing this whole thing, we are storing it into app. So we'll be using that. Anytime we use app, we'll be referring to express. All right, next thing, we're going to set up a port. We'll set up the port for connection. So const port, we pull it from our .env file. So process.env dot port. I think we can leave it like this. Let's leave it like this for now. Some people can just do this, which means that when you have these things here, it means that if your default port is not loading properly, this will work. So let's leave it. Now let's connect to our database. Connect to database. The next thing is our middleware. The course and all that are middlewares. Okay, so we'll say app.use course, and then we also want to use app express.json to make sure that all requests that are coming in so enabling course, and then we pass all incoming requests as JSON request. Alright, next thing is for us to define our routes. So let's say define routes. Then we say app.use. We want to specify that it should be API / auth / we can leave it this way. And then we have what we call user routes, which is what we called it here. So user routes. Now we want to start our server. So app.listen. So we listen to our port. Then say console.log. And then our server is running on port so and so and so. So basically we are through with this API. Now we need to test and be sure. Most of the times you're definitely going to have a problem, but let's see how it goes. So we say npm run dev. Let's wait. Alright, obviously there are errors. It says okay, did you mean to import config.data? Let's check. So it's database.js. We need to add the JS. What else? Cannot find. Alright. Okay, we have another error here. It says controllers user controller.js. So let's check. That should be here. Controllers user controller.js. Okay, this gets profile. We need to be sure if we named it gets profile. Yeah, it is gets profile, correct. So here, what are we seeing? auth underscore systems controller user controller.js imported from, cannot find user controller.js. Okay, user route. Oh, okay. So dot slash controllers slash user controller.js. Okay. Cannot find model. Okay. So let's allow our AI to debug what the error is. Okay, says user model. Hmm. Mm, okay, what is he saying? It's exactly what I was thinking about, but let's see. Oh, we didn't include .js here, so it's supposed to be .js. User model.js. Alright, now that that one is resolved, I think we still have another problem too. Okay, so this one is middleware.js. Okay, so model.js. Okay, so we also need to add a .js to this. Alright. Okay. It says max listener exceeding possible event memory leak detected. Okay, so so let's check our user model. Oh, supposed to be caps. I see. So let's just change them all. That's a mistake we made. I think I can just accept this so that it does the work for us. Yeah, this does the work. Okay, strings. Okay. Alright, so we have another one. Another error. It says what? So we can just stop the server from running. And then we rerun the server again. Okay. So this time we are encountering another error. So let's run it and see what the error is. So this error is coming from the user controller. Okay, so this is from Joey. There might have been some oversight somewhere. So we need to check and be sure. Okay, so we're using .message instead of messages, right? So this is supposed to be messages, not message. And then the same applies to the email field. And then we need to apply the same thing to the password field as well. Okay, so when that is done, now you see we have server is running on port 9000. Database connection is successful. So it means that we have been able to successfully connect to our MongoDB database, and also our port is everything is set on correctly. The next thing we need to do is to now check the endpoint. So we're going to be using Tender clients, and so we'll click on a new request. Okay, so we can just close all these files for now. And in our new request, our port is 9000, so that should be localhost 9000 / API, and then let's go to our server file and be sure of the route. So the route we have is API/alt. So this is how it's supposed to be: API/alt, just like that. And this is going to be a post request. We are trying to register a user. So we'll go into the body, and in here, remember, we are accepting username. We are also accepting email, and then we'll also accept a password field. So in this case, for simplicity's sake, we can just use password as our password, and then in the email field, we can just say john@gmail.com. For the username, we can also use John. Okay, so now that we have these things set up, we can now send a request to see if everything works perfectly. Okay, so we have an error here that says 404 not found. Let's see where the problem is. Localhost 9000 API/alt. Let me stop this server and then let's rerun it again. So in checking our register logic, we need to check and see the things that we require for registering. And here we require a username, and we require email and a password. In our case, we have this here, which is localhost 9000 / API/alt. API/alt. Oh, okay, so we need to include register as well. So alt/register, good, and then we send a request. So now you can see it says message user John registered successfully. Then we have this token here. This is the JWT token. Now we can copy this token, but before that we can go into our database and be sure that it has been saved. So when you come here, you click on browse collections. We check browse collections, and then we should be able to see the data that has been sent to the database here. I think the network is a bit slow. So whilst this is loading up, we can go back into our VsCode, and then we can let's start a new request, leave this for registration, and then we can set up a new one for logging in. So I would copy this and then I'll paste it here. I will change this to login, and for the login I would need the authorization. Remember, we're using bearer, so we click on bearer here, And then we can come back here and copy this token. So, and then we go into the new request, then we can paste this here. Then we can go back into our body, and then we copy only the email and password. Remember that when you are logging in, you need only email and password. So before this, we open curly braces and paste this here. Okay. Now this is also supposed to be a post request. So we send the request, and you see it says user john@gmail.com logged in successfully. And then we still have this same token over here. Now if we want to log John out, we simply just have to come in here, log out, and then let's copy this token and go into this place. We paste this here, and then we send the request log out. Now you see user logged out successfully. Now, like I said, ideally, this token is not even doing anything. Anytime you hit this endpoint, you just get only this message. The reason is because for logout logic, it is done via the client side. So basically, our register and our login, everything is working out perfectly. So that is basically it. So as you can see, let's try registering another person. Register John. Maybe we can register Peter. We will say peter@gmail.com, and let's just maintain the same password. It's a post request. Remember, we are sending a request. We have localhost 9000 API or to register. So we hit send. Okay, good. So in the body, we have username, email, and password. So you see it says user Peter registered successfully. Then we have this token over here. Now let's say we are trying to get the user profile. How do we go about that? To get the user profile, or let's go back to our browser and be sure. I think there is a problem from MongoDB. Okay, so it's now retrieving our databases. Okay, as you can see, we have sample data here, and this sample data is not what we are working with. So the test here is actually our data. So you can see test, then we have users. The reason we have this test here is because we did not specify a name for our database. So by default, it was named as test. And then users, since we are dealing with a user API, it just created this collection here called what users. So we can see the first user we created was John. The second user here is Peter. And so you can see the password too has been encrypted. It has been hashed. It's no longer a plain text. All right. So let's try and get the profile of the user. So I'll check so we just need to use profile. So since this has been created, let's log this one in. So we're going to do a login of Peter. So /login, and then we'll paste the token that we got here, this one, and we'll go back to the body, and instead of John this time here is going to be Peter, and remember it's the same password we are using. So send a request, and it says peter@gmail.com logged in successfully. So I'm going to copy this token. We are trying to get access to Peter's profile. So for that to happen, we need to change this login to profile, and then in the body here we can ignore this for now and go into authorization, and then we paste this new code that we have here. Okay, now you can see that for the profile is a get request, not a post. So we change the post to get, and then we hit the endpoint. Now after hitting the endpoint, you see it gives us the ID of the user, it gives us the username, it gives us the email. Now, if not because of this function, let me show you. You see in our user controller, look at what we did. So you see here, we were saying what we are finding the user by ID and we exclude the password field. So minus password. Without this minus password, this request here would have returned the password to us. Okay, so you can see that our API is working properly and everything is set up correctly. So in case you have any questions, you can reach out to me. And I am intentionally going to leave the errors that I made whilst recording this so that you appreciate how it works. I don't want to take them out and it will look like everything was perfect whilst we're working on it. Yeah, so now our API is done. So in the next lessons, we are going to focus on what would happen when you are doing this in a production environment. That's where we'll be using cookies and other things for that. All right. So until then, have a nice time. Happy coding.